Do you remember when breakfast came from a paper packet? Pudding was something you shook by hand, and a candy bar could seem long enough to last all afternoon. For kids growing up in America during the 1960s and 1970s, the grocery store was filled with foods that seemed permanent. Their boxes were bright, their commercials were unforgettable, and their names became part of everyday childhood. Then, one by one, many of them quietly disappeared. Today we are going back to 15 forgotten grocery store foods that can still unlock a surprisingly clear memory. 1. Carnation Instant Breakfast. On a rushed school morning, breakfast did not always arrive on a plate. Sometimes, it came from a little paper packet poured into a glass of cold milk. Carnation Instant Breakfast promised a quick start when there was barely enough time to find your shoes and catch the bus. Chocolate was the flavor many children remember best. You tore open the packet, dumped in the powder, and attacked the glass with a spoon. For a few seconds, a tiny brown cloud floated across the kitchen table. Then the milk slowly turned chocolate. No matter how hard you stirred, there always seemed to be a few stubborn specks clinging to the glass. And at the bottom waited the sweetest part. A little layer of chocolate powder could survive every turn of the spoon. Some kids scraped it up before running out the door. The drink felt halfway between breakfast and a milkshake, which was probably why children rarely complained about drinking it. The product itself evolved rather than simply vanishing, eventually becoming part of what is now known as Carnation Breakfast Essentials. But the old packets, old advertising, and old morning ritual belong to another era. The strongest memory may not even be the flavor. It may be the sound of the spoon hitting the glass, while somebody in the house shouted that the school bus was coming. 2. Royal Shake-A-Pudd'n. There was a time when making dessert could feel like a small athletic event. Royal Shake-A-Pudd'n turned a child into both cook and kitchen appliance. The idea was wonderfully simple. Powder went into a plastic shaker cup, cold milk followed, and then the lid had to be secured very carefully. That last part mattered. A loose lid could turn dessert into a kitchen cleaning project. Once everything was sealed, you shook the container as hard as you could. The milk sloshed inside while the powder thickened. 30 seconds could feel surprisingly long when your entire arm was doing the work. Then came the reveal. You opened the lid and found pudding where milk had been moments before. It was not elegant. It did not require a saucepan, a stove, or much patience. That was exactly the point. For children, the fun was not merely eating pudding. The fun was being allowed to make it yourself. Chocolate and butterscotch could turn an ordinary afternoon into a tiny experiment. Ready-made pudding cups eventually made instant dessert even easier. But easier was not necessarily more memorable. Anyone could peel back a foil lid. Only a Shake-A-Pudd'n kid got to earn dessert, one vigorous shake at a time. 3. Libbyland Adventure Dinners. Frozen dinners were already familiar by the 1970s. Libbyland tried something different by turning the meal itself into a children's adventure. The boxes had colorful themes and names that sounded more like Saturday morning television than supper. Inside was a meal designed specifically to appeal to young eaters. There might be fried chicken, a hamburger, hot dogs, corn, potatoes, or another familiar favorite. And then came the detail children watched carefully. Dessert occupied its own compartment. Some versions included sweet treats that made finishing the rest of the tray feel like a mission with a reward at the end. The packaging was part of the experience. A child did not simply see frozen food. The box suggested a story. That mattered in an era when children's food marketing was becoming louder, brighter, and more imaginative. Parents saw convenience. Kids saw a dinner that belonged to them. The aluminum tray went into the oven, which meant there was still a long wait compared with today's microwave meals. You could smell dinner before you could eat it. And when the tray finally arrived, every compartment had its own little territory. Libbyland dinners did not become a permanent freezer aisle institution. But for children who remember those colorful boxes, the name can bring back a very specific feeling. It was the moment when an ordinary frozen supper tried to become an adventure. 4. Fizzies drink tablets. Before bottled drinks filled entire supermarket aisles, a glass of water could become entertainment. All you needed was a fizzy. The little flavored tablet dropped into water and immediately began to bubble. Children watched it sink, dissolve, and send streams of fizz toward the surface. It looked like a tiny science experiment you were allowed to drink. There were several fruit flavors over the years, and choosing one was part of the ritual. The preparation was almost more exciting than the result. You did not pour the drink from a bottle. You made it happen, right in front of you. That fizzy transformation fit perfectly into an era fascinated by instant products, clever kitchen shortcuts, and anything that seemed slightly futuristic. For children, waiting for the tablet to finish dissolving required real restraint. Drink too early, and the tablet might still be working at the bottom. Wait too long, and some of the excitement was already gone. Fizzies disappeared, returned in later revivals, and changed formulations over time. But the original memory belongs to kitchens, where a plain glass of water suddenly became something worth staring at. Sometimes nostalgia is not a complicated flavor. Sometimes it is simply the sight of bubbles rising in a glass while you wait for permission to take the first sip. 5. Pillsbury Funny Face Drink Mix. Some products were sold by flavor. Funny Face Drink Mix was sold by personality. The packets featured cartoon characters with names children could remember almost as easily as the drinks themselves. There was Goofy Grape, Rootin' Tootin' Raspberry, Freckle Face Strawberry, and other characters that turned the pantry shelf into a miniature cast of personalities. You emptied the powder into a pitcher, added water, stirred, and watched the color spread. For birthday parties, summer afternoons, and crowded kitchens, a pitcher of sweet drink mix was inexpensive and easy. But Funny Face had something extra. Kids could argue over characters before anyone even tasted the drink. The brand also reflected how children's advertising worked in that era. A face, a funny name, and a colorful package could become part of playground conversation. Some early character names were later changed as social standards and marketing decisions evolved. For the children drinking it, though, the memory was usually much simpler. It was a cold pitcher on a warm day. Plastic cups lined up on the counter, ice cubes knocking against the sides, and a flavor with a name too ridiculous to forget. Today, the packets are gone from ordinary supermarket shelves. But say Goofy Grape around the right generation, and somebody may immediately know exactly what you mean. 6. Danish Go-Rounds. Long before toaster pastries came in endless flavors and limited editions, Kellogg's sold a breakfast pastry with a different shape. Danish Go-Rounds looked like little coils or spirals. They were meant for the toaster and offered the convenience of a pastry without a trip to the bakery. For a child, that shape made them feel different from an ordinary slice of toast. You dropped one into the toaster and waited for it to warm. Soon the kitchen carried the sweet smell of pastry and filling. The outside could become warm and slightly crisp, while the inside stayed soft and sweet. Breakfast products in the late 1960s and 1970s were increasingly competing for children's attention. Shape mattered. Packaging mattered. Convenience mattered. And sugar certainly did not hurt. Danish Go-Rounds eventually disappeared, and other toaster pastries became the familiar survivors of the category. That is often how grocery store nostalgia works. The product that vanished may once have seemed just as permanent as the product that stayed. Nobody eating breakfast thought they were preserving history. They were simply trying not to burn the pastry before school. For people who remember them, the spiral shape is often enough. One glimpse, and suddenly the old toaster, the kitchen counter, and a weekday morning all come back together. 7. Hunt's snack pack in metal cans. Pudding cups are still everywhere, but they do not arrive the way many children first remember them. Early Hunt's snack pack puddings came in small metal cans. That made dessert feel surprisingly substantial. You peeled back the metal lid and discovered chocolate, vanilla, butterscotch, or another smooth pudding waiting inside. The container was cold and solid in your hand. There was no transparent plastic showing you what was coming. You opened it and found out. Those metal lids also demanded respect. Adults warned children about sharp edges, and the warning was not imaginary. Yet millions of lunches included those little cans. They fit neatly into lunchboxes and required no refrigeration before opening, in the way many homemade desserts would. At school, the empty container became proof that the best part of lunch was already over. Some children scraped the sides so thoroughly that almost nothing remained. Eventually, plastic cups replaced the metal package. The pudding survived. The experience changed. That distinction is important. A forgotten food memory is sometimes not about a lost recipe at all. It is about packaging, sound, weight, and ritual. The metallic pull of that lid was part of dessert. Modern snack packs may taste familiar, but they cannot quite reproduce the feeling of opening a tiny can of pudding beside a thermos and a brown paper sandwich. 8. Koogle peanut spread. Peanut butter once had a strange, sweeter cousin. Koogle was a flavored peanut spread introduced in the 1970s. Instead of asking children to accept plain peanut butter, it offered flavors such as chocolate, banana, cinnamon, and vanilla. That sounded almost unfairly appealing to a kid standing in the grocery aisle. A sandwich could suddenly taste like peanut butter and dessert at the same time. The jars were colorful and playful. The product fit an era when manufacturers were constantly looking for ways to make familiar foods seem new. At home, Koogle could go onto bread, crackers, or directly onto a spoon when nobody was paying much attention. Chocolate was an obvious favorite for many children. Banana had its own devoted fans. And somewhere in America, siblings almost certainly argued over which jar should be opened next. Koogle did not last. Regular peanut butter kept its place in American cupboards, while the flavored spread became a memory. That disappearance has given Koogle an almost legendary status among people who had it as children. They do not merely remember peanut butter. They remember a particular jar, a particular flavor, and the feeling that somebody had finally improved a food that adults insisted was already perfect. 9. Toastum pop-ups. The toaster pastry aisle was not always dominated by one famous name. Toastum pop-ups were there early, offering fruit-filled pastries that went straight from package to toaster. The routine was made for busy mornings. Open the wrapper, drop the pastry into the slot, push down the lever, then wait while the heating elements glowed. Children learned an important lesson very quickly. The filling could become much hotter than the outside suggested. That first impatient bite sometimes came with instant regret. But when the temperature was right, the combination was hard to resist. Warm crust, sweet fruit filling, a breakfast you could hold in one hand. Toastum never became as culturally dominant as its biggest rival, although versions of the product have survived under different ownership and availability. For many shoppers, however, the old boxes belong to a supermarket landscape that feels long gone. The memory is not grand. That is why it works. A toaster clicks, a pastry jumps up. Someone grabs it too quickly because there are only 5 minutes before school. And suddenly, a forgotten brand has reconstructed an entire morning. 10. Marathon bar. Some candy bars were remembered for flavor. The Marathon bar was remembered for length. Introduced in the 1970s, it was a long braided caramel bar covered in milk chocolate. The package famously emphasized just how long it was. To a child holding one, the bar seemed almost comically oversized. It bent, it stretched, and because the caramel was chewy, eating it could take longer than expected. That was part of the appeal. A candy bar that lasted felt like better value when your spending money came from allowance, lawn mowing, or coins saved in a jar. The braided shape also made Marathon instantly recognizable. You did not confuse it with the ordinary rectangular bars sitting beside it. Candy aisles were powerful places for children. Every wrapper promised a decision that suddenly felt extremely important. Spend the money now? Save it? Choose the familiar favorite? Or buy the unusually long one? Marathon disappeared from American shelves in the early 1980s. Other caramel and chocolate candies remained, but the original bar became one of those products people still ask about decades later. Perhaps that is because childhood measures value differently. Adults count ounces, kids sometimes count inches, and by that standard, the Marathon bar looked like a very good deal. 11. Libby's Fruit Float. In the 1970s, even canned dessert could promise a little kitchen magic. Libby's Fruit Float combined fruit with a creamy topping that formed as the dessert was prepared and chilled. The result belonged to a very specific period of American food culture. Convenience was exciting. Bright fruit colors were inviting. And anything that created layers or transformed in the refrigerator felt more interesting than an ordinary bowl of fruit. For families, products like Fruit Float solved a simple problem. Dessert could look special without requiring hours of baking. For children, appearance mattered just as much. A creamy layer floating above colorful fruit looked like something made for company. It could appear after dinner, or at a gathering where molded salads, whipped toppings, canned fruit, and gelatin desserts already crowded the table. Today, those combinations can seem unmistakably retro. At the time, they looked modern. That reversal is one of the pleasures of remembering old food. Yesterday's convenience can become today's time capsule. Libby's Fruit Float eventually vanished from shelves, but for the people who remember a parent preparing it, the memory is not trapped inside the package. It includes the refrigerator door opening later, the serving spoon going in, and the quiet hope that your portion would contain more of the creamy part than everybody else's. 12. Nabisco Tid-Bits. Not every forgotten snack was sweet. Nabisco Tid-Bits were small cheese-flavored crackers that came in distinctive shapes and made a simple snack feel unusually specific. They were crunchy, salty, and easy to eat by the handful. A bowl could disappear during television without anyone noticing who had eaten most of it. The name itself sounded like something meant for casual snacking, not a meal, not a special occasion, just a little something from the cupboard. That ordinary role is exactly why discontinued snacks can trigger such strong memories. They lived in the background. A box might appear beside card games, after-school television, family gatherings, or a drink poured over ice. Nobody photographed the moment. Nobody wrote down the date. Then one day, the product was no longer part of the grocery trip. Years passed. The box design faded from memory, but the taste remained surprisingly easy to imagine. Tidbits developed the kind of loyal following that often becomes visible only after a product disappears. People compare later cheese crackers to them and insist the replacement is not quite right. Maybe it is not, or maybe memory has been seasoning the original for 50 years. Either way, one small cheese cracker can carry an astonishing amount of nostalgia. 13. Quisp cereal. Breakfast cereal once had to compete not only on taste, but on character. Quisp arrived with a pink, propeller-headed space alien smiling from the box. The cereal pieces were small, sweet, and shaped like little saucers. For a child in the space age, that was enough to make breakfast feel connected to cartoons and rockets. Quisp became famous through animated advertising and a playful rivalry with another cereal, Quake. Children could have opinions about which mascot was better. That was the genius of cereal marketing in those years. The box was entertainment before breakfast even reached the bowl. You poured in the cereal, added cold milk, and sometimes spent the next few minutes reading every panel of the package while eating. The prize, game, cartoon, or offer on the box could matter almost as much as the cereal itself. Quisp has returned periodically and has never been completely erased from American food history, but it no longer occupies the everyday national breakfast landscape it once did. For people who remember its peak years, the mascot alone can reopen the memory. A kitchen table, a cereal bowl, a television commercial still stuck in your head, and a cardboard box that seemed far more exciting than anything adults were eating for breakfast. 14. Reggie, bar. In the late 1970s, a baseball superstar could have his own candy bar. The Reggie bar was named for Reggie Jackson, one of the era's most famous players. It was a round confection of peanuts and caramel covered in chocolate, but the wrapper and celebrity connection were what made it an event. Sports fans were not simply buying candy, they were buying something tied to a larger-than-life athlete. When Jackson joined the New York Yankees and became one of baseball's biggest personalities, the bar arrived at exactly the right cultural moment. At Yankee Stadium, fans famously tossed Reggie bars onto the field after Jackson hit a home run on opening day in 1978. For kids collecting baseball cards and following box scores, the product joined two powerful worlds: candy and sports heroes. You could eat the bar while feeling, at least for a moment, connected to the excitement on television. Celebrity-branded foods come and go quickly. Most disappear without becoming permanent supermarket fixtures. The Reggie bar did too. Yet the name remains memorable because it belonged so completely to its moment. Say it to an old baseball fan and the response may not begin with chocolate. It may begin with a ballpark, a Yankees uniform, and a summer when Reggie Jackson seemed to be everywhere. 15. General Foods Space Food Sticks. Few snacks captured the optimism of the space age quite like space food sticks. They were narrow, chewy sticks sold as an energy food and wrapped in the excitement surrounding America's space program. For children, the important word was not food. It was space. The package suggested astronauts, rockets, and a future that seemed to be arriving faster every year. You could sit at an ordinary kitchen table and imagine you were eating something designed for a mission. That feeling was powerful after the moon landings made space travel part of everyday conversation. The sticks came in flavors including chocolate, caramel, and peanut butter. Their texture was dense and chewy. By modern standards, they might resemble an early energy bar. But modern energy bars rarely come with the fantasy of becoming an astronaut before lunch. Space food sticks eventually disappeared from mainstream American shelves. Attempts to revive them years later proved how strongly people remembered the name. And that is a fitting place to end. These 15 foods were never just ingredients in a box. They were sounds, packages, commercials, lunch boxes, kitchen counters, and small rituals repeated until nobody noticed them anymore. Then the products changed, the stores changed, the children grew up. And somehow a pudding cup, a drink tablet, or a candy wrapper became a doorway back to a house that may no longer exist. Which one of these 15 do you remember? And what forgotten grocery store food from your childhood deserves to be on the next list? Tell us in the comments. Someone else may have been trying to remember that same taste for 50 years.